Your way right here on Citizens AM, KCAM Digital Radio.
Friends, welcome back to Coup Save America. I have a disturbing bit of news that I need to share with all of you today. It has been said, and with increasing fervor, and this is going to come as a shock to many of you, but the 2024 elections are shaping up to be the most consequential of our lifetimes, casting shadows over the very core of our so-called democracy. Now, I know this again comes as a great shock to many of you, and of course, this sentiment is not new. We heard it in 2016. We heard it again in 2020. And if we go back even further, well, you get the idea. It is a recurring pattern. And I think we can all agree that it turned out to be correct each and every time. So when the cry rang out again in 2020, just like with 2016, we nodded vigorously. Now here we are again in 2024, facing another quote-unquote pivotal election. Given our country's recent pattern, it wouldn't be surprising if every upcoming election for the rest of eternity carries this same tag of unprecedented importance. It almost seems as though the United States is caught in a relentless cycle of political tension, ping-ponging back and forth between insanity and, well, maybe not quite as crazy. In my opinion, the 2024 and subsequent elections of at least my lifetime are indeed pivotal, but only if they manage to pivot away from the status quo. Folks, we are trapped in a two-party system, or I should say supposedly two-party system. But I have long professed that the United States of America has become a one-party system consisting of money and power versus power and money. Now, you have heard a lot of discussion on this particular show about neoliberalism, a political approach that favors free market capitalism, deregulated markets, increasing trade, and, of course, reducing government spending, often through avenues such as privatization or cutting social welfare programs and taxing the middle class. A government with a capitalistic agenda will inevitably neglect the needs of the very people that it is supposed to represent and protect. Along those lines, a Harvard study shows that 51% of young Americans between the ages of 18 and 29 do not support capitalism. Now, that's not because they've been swayed by Russian propaganda or influenced by third-party idealists. It's because many of them are grappling with the systemic inequalities and are disillusioned with a system that often seems indifferent to their struggles. And in fact, that system is indeed indifferent to their struggles. Recent studies, such as the one published by researchers Martin Gilens and Benjamin I. Page, shed light on the dominance of elite and corporate interest in U.S. policymaking. Their comprehensive analyses of over 2 decades of data suggest that economic elites and special interest groups substantially sway government policy, whereas average citizens like, I don't know, you and I, have little to no independent influence. This is alarming to say the least. The very essence of a democratic society is for the majority to have a say, and yet the evidence suggests that we're veering closer and closer to becoming an oligarchy. I would argue that we already are one. The Democratic Party, traditionally seen as a progressive voice in our so-called two-party system, has over the years veered closer and closer to the right, embracing neoliberalism, and it has been infiltrated by corporate interest. A study by Thomas Ferguson titled Golden Rule, the Investment Theory of Party Competition, lays bare the truth of political power being driven more by corporate finance than democratic choice. The Democratic Party, which should be championing the voices clamoring for, universal health care, climate action, fair wages, often present policies that at the very least tiptoe around the demands, choosing instead to cater to, you guessed it, their corporate donors. Let's just take a closer look at some of the neoliberal actions of the Democratic Party that are not receiving nearly enough attention or scrutiny. Let's begin with this narrative about President Joe Biden that paints him as a bastion of moderation, a unifying figure in American politics. Okay? A closer look at his record, well, that suggests a more, let's say, complex, to be polite, and perhaps concerning portrait, particularly when it comes to things like foreign policy. Now, we all know that for decades, the U.S. military-industrial complex has been a force of undeniable influence in our American politics. We were warned about this by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who warned that its growing power in his farewell address. Well, he was right. It's been posited by various analysis that President Biden, despite his affable demeanor, has long been influenced by this powerful nexus. One only has to look at his entire career history. But let's break down the numbers. According to the Center for Responsive Politics, Biden's 2020 campaign received over $5. Did I just say $5? I'm teasing. $5 million from the defense sector. And in case you're wondering, no, these donors are not philanthropists. They actually expect a return on their investment. So now let's consider Biden's political actions. Let's go back in time a bit to the 1990s, when as senator, Biden voted for the Iraq War. Now, this was a conflict that led to the deaths of thousands of Americans and, well, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians. And let's be clear, this war was based on misinformation and misjudgment, and reasonable journalists at the time pointed this out. But it undeniably benefited one group of people, the military-industrial complex, with contracts worth billions and billions of dollars. This push for military spending isn't just a relic of Biden's past. Go back a little bit not too long ago, and as vice president under Obama, he oversaw foreign policy decisions that expanded America's drone warfare, leading to an increase in civilian casualties. And this was reported by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. Now let's skip ahead a little bit and look at Biden's current presidency. Now, many had hoped, delusional perhaps, for a shift in American militarism under Biden. Yet the early indicators point toward a continuity of old policies. In February 2021, barely a month, mind you, into his presidency, Biden ordered airstrikes in Syria, marking a familiar interventionist stance. The Pentagon budget for 2022, as proposed by the Biden administration, is a staggering $753 billion. Just a slight increase from Trump's last defense budget, as detailed by the Defense Department's budget request. If the goal was to prioritize diplomacy over warfare, well, this budget certainly does not reflect that agenda. Furthermore, many of Biden's chosen advisors and cabinet members have ties to the defense industry. Take, for instance, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Prior to his nomination, he sat on the board of Raytheon Technologies, one of the nation's top defense contractors. This revolving door between defense contractors and political appointees only solidifies the grip of the military-industrial complex on our foreign policy. While President Biden may present himself as a diplomatic facade, the data and his history suggest a more hawkish stance, one deeply entrenched in the interest of the military-industrial complex. And folks, we need to look no further than the Ukraine proxy war that's currently going on right now as evidence of this. Now, as concerned citizens, it's our duty to look beyond the surface and to question and to hold our leaders accountable for the decisions that they make in our name. We're going to get to accountability later on in the program. Let's talk about another disturbing relic of President Biden's presidency. Our First Amendment right to free speech stands as a pillar of American democracy, right? It's this freedom, after all, that underpins all others, enabling an open exchange of ideas, fostering innovation, and holding power to account. But recent actions by President Joe Biden's administration suggest an alarming erosion of this fundamental right, specifically as it pertains to the digital realm. Let's start with a foundational understanding. The First Amendment, at its core, prohibits the government from infringing upon the free speech of citizens. While private companies certainly have the autonomy to dictate content policies on their platform, the line blurs when government becomes involved in directing these policies. In July 2021, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki acknowledged that the Biden administration was, quote, flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation, end quote, related to COVID-19. While the intention may be to safeguard public health, this partnership raises red flags concerning government overreach into private editorial decisions. Now, why is this troubling? Well, first and foremost, a study published in the Columbia Journalism Review reveals that a delicate balance needs to be struck between combating misinformation and upholding free speech. Excessive government involvement can tip this balance, leading to a potential suppression of dissenting voices. In 2020, the Pew Research Center found that 72% of American adults believed social media platforms actively censored political views that they found objectionable. With the government's direct involvement, well, this perception just grows, and it threatens the very fabric of public trust and free expression. This slippery slope becomes evident. If government can influence tech giants to remove or flag content under one context, well, what is stopping them from doing so under another pretext? We've seen similar tactics played out in countries such as Russia and China, where government influence over online platforms stifle dissent and breed self-censorship. A study from Freedom House on internet freedom cites multiple countries where government intervention on digital platforms has led to decreased freedom of expression and an increased climate of fear. To reiterate, misinformation is absolutely a genuine concern. Yet solutions, well, they should not undermine the very fabric of the democratic ideals that we aim to uphold. The government's involvement in directing content removal on private platforms encroaches upon the sanctity of the First Amendment. As we navigate this digital age, it is crucial that we remain vigilant, ensuring our rights remain undiminished in the face of ever-evolving challenges. But returning to the topic of the Democratic Party's downward spiral into neoliberalism, let's look at a very big problem. That problem goes by the name of Andrew Biggs. One common argument that is put forward to voters who are on the fence about Joe Biden is the need to protect Social Security and Medicare. I support these efforts. However, this argument tends to fail to even acknowledge that Joe Biden has spent the entirety of his political career advocating for cuts to these very programs. I know. Some of my friends have suggested that this is all in the past, that Joe Biden has evolved. And while it's certainly true that people can change with time, there's absolutely zero evidence to support a shift in Joe Biden's thinking. On May 13, 2022, Joe Biden chose Andrew Biggs, a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, a notably right-leaning think tank, for a seat on the bipartisan Social Security Advisory Board. This board, birthed in 1994, was designed to guide both the president and Congress on the intricacies of the Social Security system. Let's dive a little deeper into the background of Mr. Andrew Biggs to see if he was indeed the smartest choice if there is a goal to protect the incomes of the elderly and persons with disabilities. For many years, Biggs has been an ardent critic of the very essence of what Social Security represents: the promise of a stable, secure retirement shielded from the unpredictable swings of the stock market. Mr. Biggs has on numerous occasions diminished the urgency of the retirement crisis, even going so far as to suggest, as recently as 2020, mind you, that the challenges facing Social Security are due to an, quote, older Americans' game of chicken, end quote. And if we take a step back in time 2 decades ago, we find Biggs actively working within a Bush administration commission, pushing an agenda to privatize Social Security. The thing that we're supposed to be fighting against. There are many reasons why the privatization of Social Security is an unreliable solution that puts the average American at risk. And it's a bit concerning, at least to me, that a person who once championed such a strategy has been given power over the very system that he has so often rebuked. Now, speaking of appointees that are corrupt, let's shine a light on another serious issue that has so far escaped the scrutiny that it deserves. A recommendation buried deep within a report from President Joe Biden's National Infrastructure Advisory Council brings to the fore an issue of tremendous concern. Let's see, what is it going to be? Privatization. Yes, the privatization of U.S. water systems. Now, why should this alarm us? Perhaps because water is a basic human right. Access to clean and safe water is not and should not be a privilege. It is, in fact, a necessity. And the potential privatization of this vital resource threatens its accessibility and affordability to the masses. Hidden on page 15 of a 38-page document, the National Infrastructure Advisory Council suggests that federal government should actively pave the way for the privatization of community water systems. It recommends, quote, removing barriers, end quote, that prevent private corporations from funding these systems. But here's the catch. The chairman of this council, Abeye Agalisi, is no stranger to big business. He's the head honcho at Global Infrastructure Partners, GIP, an investment bank with a staggering $100 billion in assets, which focus on sectors including, you guessed it, water infrastructure. The national watchdog Food and Water Watch points out the glaring problem. GIP stands to gain significantly from the privatization of water and wastewater utilities. There's an inherent conflict of interest in a chairman whose company benefits financially from the very recommendations his advisory council is making. The pitch we often hear for privatization is one of efficiency and cost savings. But experience has shown us that privatizing essential services often results in higher prices and compromised service for citizens, with profits prioritized over people. It's a classic case of profits over public welfare. We have seen this play out in numerous instances around the world, where the privatization of water has led to soaring prices, water shortages, and even public health crises. Now, I ask you, should we be entrusting our most precious resource to entities whose primary goal and commitment is their bottom line? When a company's fundamental goal is to make profits, what assurance do we, the people, have that our right to water will not become a mere entry on a balance sheet? The path we're being nudged along is fraught with risks that challenge the very essence of our social fabric. We need to recognize this and demand a transparent, accountable system that places public interest over corporate profits. Our water, our right. It's as simple as that. Furthermore, the Democratic Party has, through their drift towards neoliberal policies, provided an unintentional, and I would even say intentional, bolster to the Republican Party. By not being staunchly progressive and proactive, they have left room for the far right to rise, effectively cornering many voters. This strategy forces individuals into a binary choice, a neoliberal agenda or an even more extremist one. By elevating far-right voices as the dominant alternative, Democrats have made their own platform appear as, quote, the lesser evil, end quote, thereby holding voters hostage to a system that doesn't truly represent their interest and couldn't give a shit about them. Historically, the Democratic Party was the party of FDR's New Deal and Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society. It was a party that once championed the worker, the labor unions, and those without a voice. But somehow along the way, started with Bill Clinton, that core principle began to fade. By the 1980s and the 1990s, the party shifted its priorities, embracing more business-friendly policies and pushing for deregulation and free trade. Now, globalization and free trade aren't necessarily inherently bad, but when managed poorly, they can decimate industries and communities that rely upon them. According to a study from Ball State University, nearly 87% of manufacturing job losses from 2000 to 2010 were due to technological changes, mainly automation. However, this reality was compounded by trade policies like NAFTA, which, according to the Economic Policy Institute, led to the loss of roughly 700,000 jobs, mainly from the industrial heartland. The Democratic Party's swing toward neoliberalism and its cozying up to Wall Street came at a steep price to the impact that preferences the average American and the influence that average Americans have on the government policy. This feeling of neglect among the working class due to tangible shifts in policy led to increased cynicism and a sense of betrayal, making fertile ground for the far right's message of a return to quote-unquote greatness. Thomas Piketty's work, Capital in the 21st Century, suggests that when economic disparities grow, there is a corresponding rise in populist sentiments, with the top 1% of American families owning 40% of the country's wealth, according to a study by NYU professor Edward N. Wolf. Is it any wonder that people are drawn to such extreme solutions? The Democratic Party's retreat from the working class and its embrace of neoliberalism did not just create an economic void, it created a cultural and emotional one as well. The far right stepped in, capitalizing on these feelings of abandonment, offering a home for those who felt betrayed. There's a narrative that has persisted within certain factions of the Democratic Party, particularly in the aftermath of major electoral setbacks. And this narrative often seeks external factors or scapegoats, be it Russian interference or third-party voters, as the reason for their defeats. While external influences and third-party ballot parties do have voting dynamics that may play a role, however slightly, it should be troubling to all of us to see a party bypass introspection in favor of more palatable excuses. Let's start with the oft-cited Russian interference. Yes, according to U.S. intelligence agencies, there were efforts by Russian operatives to sow discord and influence the 2016 elections. But to place the entirety of the blame on this is not only absurd, it is to ignore the years-long erosion of trust and growing discontentment among large swaths of the American population. It oversimplifies a multifaceted issue, one where internal party decisions, messaging failures, and perceived elitism played no small role. What the Democratic Party needs now, more than ever, is a genuine acknowledgement of these grievances, a realignment with its base, which longs for authentic representation, a dedication to policies that address systemic inequalities. It's easy to point fingers and assign blame externally. It's much harder to introspect, to acknowledge shortcomings, and to enact real systemic change. For the Democratic Party to regain trust and rebuild, it will need to choose the harder path, to listen to the actual pain points of its constituents, and not get lost in the allure of more convenient narratives. But will they do any of this? Not a chance in hell. The Democratic Party sees a far easier and much more lucrative path to power, simply presenting as marginally more palatable than the other side, and playing up that difference to the point where people are afraid to vote against them for fear of losing the few scraps the party might toss their way. They have taken an electoral system that is barely any choice built into it whatsoever in the first place, and then removed even the small amount of agency that the American people thought they possessed. Democrats are failing at even the very essence of democracy, free and fair elections. It's an open secret that the Democratic primary system lacks transparency. A notable example is the 2016 primary, where the Democratic National Committee rigged their own primary against Bernie Sanders in favor of course, their handpicked oligarch, Secretary Hillary Clinton. In subsequent legal proceedings, the DNC's defense itself argued that they have the right to select candidates in back rooms, far from public eye, defying the principles of a transparent democratic process. The Democratic Party outright telling you, you don't have a voice. Who you pick in the primaries doesn't matter. We can pick whoever the hell we want to. We've done it before, and we'll continue to do it again and again and again. So I ask you, it's kind of crucial to ask, how can we trust a party to defend our national democracy when there is evidence suggesting they can't even uphold these principles internally? Now, here's where the lesser of two evil paradigm comes into play. When voters continually settle for candidates that do not truly represent their interests or values, they indirectly perpetuate a system wherein genuine change is stymied, if not outright impossible. I get it. One might argue that voting this way prevents the greater evil from taking office. But this cyclical strategy of fear-based voting has significant long-term consequences that have both stifled genuine progress and constricted the vast realm of what we consider political possibilities. By constantly settling for the status quo, or only marginally better options, voters inadvertently fail to address the root cause of societal unrest and discontent, such as wealth equality, the lack of health care, and systemic racism. In essence, we must question the trajectory of our political engagement. Are we merely delaying the inevitable? Voting for the lesser of two evils merely a short-term band-aid that ignores a festering wound? Democracy thrives on choice, accountability, and representation. And if you are scared into voting, that is not representation, that is manipulation. By continually settling for less, we are quite possibly trading these pillars for short-lived comfort, allowing systemic corruption and deep-seated injustices to persist unchecked. Another unintended consequences of this lesser evil strategy is the suppression of third parties and alternative voices. The United States is one of the few mature so-called democracies where two parties dominate the political landscape so completely. In Europe, for example, multi-party systems allow for a wider range of political expressions and ensure that more citizens feel truly represented. But no, here in the United States, third-party candidates are denied the most precarious of footholds. The cartoon show South Park highlighted this problem well in a 2004 episode that parodied the presidential election between George W. Bush and John Kerry. The South Park gang were forced to choose between a giant douche or a turd sandwich as their new school mascot. And when the student Stan refuses to vote for either ridiculous candidate, he is demonized and kicked out of town. This sentiment is more than just a silly comedy sketch. It's the current reality that we are now living in. Every election season, we hear claims that votes for third-party candidates are wasted or stolen from major contenders. Even worse, we blame third parties when our own party's Democratic candidate happens to lose, like with Hillary Clinton. Who do we blame for that? We blame Jill Stein, which is an absurd claim and not even factually accurate. But is it not a cornerstone of democracy for individuals to actually vote their conscience? To chastise citizens for choosing a candidate that they believe in is just antithetical to the democratic ethos. And more troubling, these external blaming narratives divert attention from more deep-seated issues. Again, the growing economic disparities, the dilution of workers' rights, soaring healthcare costs, the crippling burden of student loans, the existential dread of climate change, and I could go on and on. The list just continues on and on here in America. The only way for the American people to free themselves from this political trap is to wake up. Stop rallying to their ineffectual parties' battle cries. Stop falling for the distractions and band together in large enough masses to break the status quo once and for all. And the only way to do this might be squaring our shoulders, facing the disapproval of our peers, and voting only for a candidate who we truly believe has our best interest at heart. Let us remember that democracy is not just about casting a vote. It's about casting a vote that counts, casting a vote that matters, casting a vote for true representation. By recognizing and challenging the limitations of our current two-party duopoly, we can pave the way for a more inclusive, representative, and effective democracy. And this leads me to today's discussion. I am so tired of this lesser of two evil strategies. I'm so tired of being told that we must elect Joe Biden because if we don't, Donald Trump will win. And somehow American democracy will be saved with another 4 years under Joe Biden. Here's a promise that I can make to you right now. Let's say that we give the Democratic Party a full-out majority. We give Joe Biden another 4 years. Guess where we're going to be in 2 years from now? 2 years from 2024, rather. Another midterm elections where, once again, we're going to have the same loser candidates, the same neoliberals, the same people who do not represent us running again and again. And 2 years later, in the next presidential election, guess what? We're going to have someone even worse than Donald Trump on the other side. So this cycle of fear-based voting will just keep. Again, we've seen it over and over again already, from George W. Bush to 2016 with Hillary Clinton. At what point are we going to get a candidate that actually represents the people? And I get it. Now is not the time to vote your conscience. It's not the time to vote for someone like Cornel West. No. It's not time for values and morals. Well, I have to ask the question, when the hell is it going to be time? Because you know what? It's not going to be time. That time is never going to come by the Democratic Party. The time is going to come when we stand up and say, enough. Enough. And if we send a clear enough message, who knows? We might actually just get an actual democracy. At the very least, we'll get someone who's in the White House fighting for each and every one of us and working to establish systemic change. This is a topic that I get very passionate about. I'm supporting Dr. Cornel West. Now, a lot of things can change between here and the election. And I've been vilified on platforms like Facebook and Twitter because, of course, we all know that Dr. Cornel West couldn't possibly win. And I want you to think about that claim, because I hear this all the time. Dr. Cornel West cannot possibly win the election. Is that not itself an admission that we do not live in a democracy? I thought that the person who received the most votes in a democracy became president. So let me turn this back on you. Dr. Cornel West can most certainly win if he has your vote. That's how it works, right? So when you make these accusations that, oh, well, Cornel West could never possibly win, what you're actually arguing is that we don't have a democracy and that you are playing the game willingly and knowingly, because that's what it comes down to. It comes down to a game. And it's a game that we're going to lose no matter what. So the question is, do we risk another 4 years of Donald Trump for another 4 years of Joe Biden and think that anything is going to fundamentally change? It will change. It will get worse. That is guaranteed. It will get worse. And I'm tired of hearing about these so-called accomplishments of the Democratic Party. Again, breadcrumbs are not a solution to people who are starving. That's the final word up front. This is Sean Sainhard, and you are watching Coup Save America, and we will be right back. Welcome back. My guest today is a friend from Facebook, an average citizen who is supporting Dr. Cornel West, again, as of now. And his name is Lloyd McNeil. And he also is a moderator of a Facebook group that I'm going to want to talk to. But more importantly, what I want to do is I want to have a discussion between two third-party voters, myself and Lloyd. And I want to talk about the issues affecting America. And I want to talk about this lesser of two evils strategy from a voter's perspective, because that's what we are. Everyone watching this is a voter. And we all face the same struggles in this country. And we all face the same choices. And I would argue that the choice between a Democrat and a Republican is not a choice at all. It's an illusion of choice. A lot of us were inspired by Bernie Sanders. And we see where that got us. We see Bernie Sanders' nomination virtually stolen from us. And we also see the Democratic Party engaging in smear tactics against, at the time, Bernie Sanders, and once again with Cornel West. Let's bring in our guest, Lloyd McNeil.
Hey, Sean. Can you hear me?
Hey, Lloyd. Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
All right. Everything you just listened to you say, you're pretty much on point with everything. It's real easy to agree with you. Couldn't find any points of difference on pretty much any of that, except maybe a couple of the larger frames, which is I definitely think we're past that it's not getting worse. We're in the middle of the show that just goes ahead and pretends like it can get worse. Like they really don't want a white nationalist leadership and we're going to go to a one-party fascist system. No, we have this duopoly. It works great. What they have is they have everybody fearful of that happening. And that's how as a parent, it's way easier to, the threat works as long as they're still scared of the threat. As soon as you go through with the threat, it starts losing its value. I mean, first time you get sent to the principal's office, kind of, the fear goes away of getting sent the next time, keeps on going that way. So they want to just keep you in fear of what's going to happen next. So I kind of think we're, anything that's got the illusion of that we have a democracy going on, I suspect it's all just part of a show and theatrics, including, what they've got Donald Trump going through right now with, prosecuting him. We go back through the presidents and look at war crimes, and there's not an interest in doing any of that. So they kind of find, some charges that they're not worried about getting used against them in the future, but give them some strength of the RICO to go after Cop City down there in Atlanta.
Yes,
you've seen that override.
Yes,
but then so just talking with you, Sean, I feel like there is a small group of us that are kind of have all been paying attention to what's going on. We all have a general idea of what the problem is. And I think it's pretty much up to us, the very minority of us that really see this, to come together, hash out the minor differences that we have left over, and figure out a war plan. Because this is not a political strategy anymore. This is, how do you take back the voice, the narrative from the corporate media, and get people to hear what's going on. And the battlefields in the minds of America. How do we go ahead and get that influence back? And I think one of the first things is to quit feeling isolated and alone in like your position and the position of like quite a few podcasters out there. I saw you're associated with like Sabby Sabs. Is that correct?
Not associated, but very supporter of the show.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cause your name was streaming across the bottom of one of her broadcasts. I wasn't quite sure what the connection was between the two, but I saw her, plug in your name on one of her podcasts. So I'm like, you guys at least know each other or something. And I think that, unifying those voices, they're all kind of have the same message. And I'm a proponent of a roundtable concept to come together and create a brand and a label that, is, trusted and valued and transparent, so people can see this. I think the basic idea of like a town hall with a roundtable and a public commons, this space that we need, it's familiar metaphor, that we need to create that online. And the people that are already loud, speaking out, I think that those are who. So on your show right now, I would like to, get to talking with more podcast hosts that, would be interested in doing it, creating an effort like this. So anyway,
I'm definitely interested, and I agree 100%. You brought up the matter of Donald Trump and the indictment, and
you're breaking up on me a bit. Hold on.
Is this better?
Yeah, I didn't. That all cut out. So I don't know if we've got a technical glitch.
Here, is this any better?
Yeah, yes. Now you're fine.
Perfect. You talked about the indictment of Donald Trump just a minute ago, and I just want to, it's very confusing because the charges that they did bring up against him are a little worrying to me. I think that they could have charged him for far different crimes than what they did. And you also see the indictment. People will argue about this all day, that it's not political, and it absolutely is political. That's the illusion of this entire process, is that this is political. The timing of it is very political. I can't decide if they're trying to keep him off the ballot or if they want him on the ballot at this point.
Like this guy, I just was talking about this past week with people. I'm like, I think my view is, it's speculation. I think it's a show. I think it's put on, and I think they're what they're really interested in finding out, because they're manipulating the population. This is just not just entertainment value, but like how are they controlling the minds of people? So they're going to probably wait till the primary and see how these other candidates are doing, and then make some decisions. I think if they see that they can go ahead and Biden's strong enough to win, then they'll probably that it makes sense to lock Trump up or prevent him from being able to be on the ballot. That fractures the Republican side. It's going to, if that happens, there's going to be a lot of the, hardcore, diehard Trump supporters that are going to go after whichever voice, carries the torch for him. And then there'll be a lot of others that'll be kind of fed up and maybe jump over to the West side, make it look like those, that Cornel West is pulling votes away. But, then Biden could possibly be strong enough to do it. I mean, I think there's no chance that Marianne Williamson or RFK Jr. are going to get through the DNC. And I've questioned their campaigns. I've gone to them. I'm like, do you guys have a strategy for this? And I've gotten like, hey, no, we don't. We're waiting to find out what happens in New Hampshire. We're waiting to I'm like, really, you're waiting. So you have no strategy. You're being subject to whatever is going on with the people that do have strategy. And we know they have strategy. They have think tanks. They pump $1 billion into elections. They have the rules in place, from everything from gerrymandering to the FEC, which is 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats. And the only thing that they do is just make sure no third party can get in. And one of the most efficient ways they've done that is they made it against the rules. So they have rules. And instead of making it that you have to pay to collaborate, because nobody would do that. Nobody would find it acceptable. Like, what do you mean? I have to pay to talk to other people? No. So they make it illegal that your campaign can't coordinate with another campaign. This organization can't work with this PAC or with this nonprofit over here to go ahead and share information to do that. That coordination will get you a fine. Well, when you're raising billions of dollars for your campaign, like in 2020, I think the Republicans and the Democrats each paid out $5 million in fines. And that's impossible for a third party like that. Like, I know people get it, but like third parties, they're not that funded. That's not the kind of money they can throw around. And so going after them, even I think between Jill Stein and Marianne Williamson, they both got racked up for anywhere from $250,000 to almost $1 million. I think between them, somewhere like I think Jill might have been around $250,000, 277,000 or something like that. And I think Marianne Williamson racked up even more during her campaign. And the FEC looks fair because they go after everybody equally, but you see how it's rigged, it's it's a scam. Like, I mean, and that's the people that we need to get are the people that are fully aware of this and realize that we're at war. We really have to go ahead and come up with a information campaign. And the sitting around and rehashing what you just did, like your whole spiel, I agree with. I'm just sitting there, yep, all familiar, got it. And like there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, like, and they really do like listening to that. But if we just keep ourselves in a silo in an echo chamber, we're not going to be effective. So what is the thing we can do right now? So that's kind of been where my focus is, and so that's kind of where we met. Was I'm on Facebook trying to organize and get people together. So
yeah, and you've done a great job. I mean, I'm very impressed with the job that you've done. I mean, there's a group that you're a moderator of that I'd like you to talk about getting Cornel West. More.
Oh yeah. Well, so there's a few Facebook pages that are for that. There's you can look them up. They got lengthier names and they all kind of sound alike. But Dr. Cornel West for President 24. was the one I was working as a moderator on. I'm no longer like modding on that. I've moved on to putting my focus onto three Facebook pages that kind of work together. One is called a public commons, the other one is a town hall, and then the other one is called a roundtable. And they all have, they work together, but they have different rules so that we can actually have a dialogue and discussion, because that is one of the logistical challenges. So for us to get together, I mean, Sean, how many people do you think we could get together that really, agree with agree with what you've said, and are making an effort to go ahead and put that information out? Do you think we could get 100? I mean, we really tried. Could we get 100, Sean? So it's not a large body. And like, if we could all get together on the same page, then we can start working on, and we know, and you guys are familiar with it, others are too, is how to go ahead and be able to use social media to go ahead and send and control the message and get it out. And we know if you sit around and be passive about it, I was just looking at Sean King. He'll often lament on his Facebook page that his Facebook page doesn't get any exposure. And that is often like the only post I see from Sean King's page, unless I go looking at it. That shows up every once in a while on my feed. But anything that he's usually talking about seriously, it just won't go through my the passive feed on my page. So that is really effective about keeping people from knowing what's relevant. So even with social media, we have to create active strategies for going out and getting this information out there too.
Yes, because we are being censored.
Oh yeah. I mean, this goes when I was in 2000s working on campaigns. My backstory, I dropped out after like 08, 09. I saw what Obama was doing. I gave up, literally moved out to the boonies. I became completely, just disillusioned, disenfranchised, just screw it. I'm just doing my own thing. But even back then I was calling up, the news stations, MSNBC and whoever else. And I was asking them like, how are you missing these big stories that I'm finding out by doing this other research online that are actually current events that are going on? How come you're blowing this? They're like, yeah, it just doesn't come down the pipe for us. There's editors at the top. They're just making these decisions and controlling what the information is. So we know that, the mainstream media, everybody seems like there's too many people still listening to it, but we understand the problem there. So how can we get together and create a broadcast, put out news? And we have to looking at things in terms of, information and bandwidth. We really have to be mindful of like the mathematics of it. We're talking about getting messages across to people in 30-second sound bites. We're talking about branding and marketing. So these sorts of things that we've kind of looked at as being the enemy for a long time, these tactics. I'm like, no, they're just tactics. We really need to use them. We definitely need to be clear about what our goals are, but we cannot get away with expecting people to sit down, listen to a Noam Chomsky talk for an hour and explain things. That's, I've got it to a point where I know if I even put I could write a couple of paragraphs of some pretty well thought out things, and if I post it in the wrong group, it's just misunderstood, and it'll start arguments from people that just, what are you trying to say here? I'm like, in the language I'm reading of English, this is perfectly clear. But I think a huge chunk of Americans really are not operating at that level, and I don't want to be.
How much is it a problem of we've become so polarized in this country? And people will read a post and they will naturally assume a political alignment.
Yes. It pissed me off the most back when the pandemic was going on, because usually I understand these and I can play with them. But when the pandemic came on, the stuff with the masks, I was just kind of like, I'm like, dude, really, you want me to put this mask on and go? Like, I'm being like whatever childish you might want to call about it. But I'm like, what really came down to finally get me to like put a mask on was the identity situation. Like, shit, people are going to think I'm a Trump supporter. And it's not so much that I have a problem with like even being viewed like that. I'm like, I just didn't want to put that negative energy into my environment, because I know what happens when they see a Trump supporter. Then they're pissed off, and then I'm helping spread bad vibes. So I'm like, just so I don't spread bad vibes, I'll wear my mask. But one of my favorite the linguist, George Lakoff. You can if your listeners do not know who George Lakoff is, Lakoff, pull up just about anything and listen to 15 minutes of George Lakoff, and he'll help you kind of realize that your cognition and your thinking isn't as complicated as what you think it is. It works off of much simpler system, and it's a lot of like guessing, and there are frames involved. So you can boil a framework down to a single word, and a lot of times in a simple phrase. And the guys that put the news out on the, on your, mainstream media, they set these up, and everybody likes to find a little video clip of everybody using the same frame on all the different stations with the keywords, key expressions, keywords, these things come through. And that's how they go ahead and be able to control information with these little sound bites. It's very powerful. And the people on our side need to realize that is what we kind of have to start doing. An hour to 2 hour long podcast that gets into like the really depth, that's for us. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Intellectual porn. It's not what these guys are going to be watching. It's not what's going to win the war. And we can justify and be right all day long. Oh, I'm so right, Sean. Let me tell you, my opinion is the number one opinion. I know what I'm talking about, Sean. So we got that. That's our culture. And if we're intellectually honest with ourselves, we should be able to get together, kind of come to a collective point of view while remaining open-minded. But it's not doing us any good to go ahead and just continue to just justify that we're on the right. We can be on the right all day long, and we're not winning a war. That's just how history goes. I mean, the Native Americans were right all the way to the end. Yeah. So, the situation right now too is reframing this and a realization that this isn't we're saying this is the most important election. No, this is the same election, I think, since at least 2000 or 2004 with George Bush. Yeah. Definitely since post 9/11. And I don't know where your viewers are in that, but let's just say that over half this country does not believe the official 9/11 narrative, and that you will never see a discussion of the 9/11 narrative on any mainstream media, except to reaffirm that that's what it is. It is not going to be challenged. It's not going to be discussed. And, I actually got into an exchange with Noam Chomsky on this. I was asking, why don't you speak up on like the 9/11 stuff? He's like, it was quite clear. It's like, that's if I talk on this, I'm not an expert in that. I have nothing to say, and I'm going to get, I'm lose credibility. Basically what it is. I'm not going, because I'm not an engineer. I can't speak on these things. Right. And he was just like, there's enough like going on with the fact that they're lying about going into Iraq. They're doing all these other things. I can just follow the consequences, and do it like the Hurricane Katrina style. We don't have to say that they created the hurricane, but we definitely know how they handled the circumstances and the events. So, without getting into the details of 9/11, I definitely think since 9/11, the audacity to go ahead and use that for all the purposes that we use, the war on terror, the incursions into Iraq, Afghanistan, the trillions, dude, so much money into the military industrial complex since then. I mean, I definitely think since that point, we are in kind of the most Orwellian, Brave New World hybrid circumstance that you can imagine. And my question is I've been trying to get involved politically again. Like I said, after 08, 09, I really did take a hiatus. I knew it was pointless to be arguing about it. I didn't think that my vote was going to count. I definitely saw that the control was there, and it really didn't matter what my opinion was. So I kind of stayed out of politics, made my life easier. I got a daughter now. She's 8 years old. And I just, since she was born, I just can't stomach the fact that I know what I'm, if I make the effort, I could be capable of something. Like you've got me here today. And this is after just being a couple weeks back into being active and trying to get back up to speed with what's going on in politics. But yeah, we definitely need to, recognize our situation and move forward and realize that this is, we got to quit talking about this like it's just an election and who to vote for. Let's just say we already know what this shit is. Quit debating that ourselves and start working on get together as a behind the scenes situation to create an informational campaign and see how many people we can bring on board to the rebellion. I mean, this is no longer kind of like, this is straight up. We have to take steps to overthrow it. And my issue is if we do get enough momentum, how far will they let it go?
Right.
I do generally get concerned. Like, okay, so if we beat them, they've got the system in place. with defense upon defense. So, it's not a matter of like, oh, if we could go ahead and win the primer, and then if we could win the election. No, that's not how it's going to go. Like, we really have to say, like, okay, how much control do they have over the police, and what's gone on with the creation of a police state? And that's one of the things that I will nail Biden for all day long. It's like going back to the crime bills in the 90s to even what is the bipartisan thing that he just did? What was that called?
Which one? The infrastructure plan?
Yeah, it's like the ones. If you look up Biden's accomplishments, it's like the number one on his list. The Biden, it's got some money in there for throws $1 billion at mental health, which will likely go to helping the billion that's getting thrown at mental health. That's money that's going to go to the foundations that donated to his campaign. Oh wow, no shock there. It's not like it's Medicare and it's not going to go ahead and really help the people out. It just helps. The money ends up at the foundation. If you just follow the trail, it helps some people along the way, but that's a way to get it to them, and it's a $13 billion bill. We got one bill already, $1 billion set aside for the mental health in that aspect. But then there's $750 million that goes towards police. It's like straight up. It's like, and it's supposed to be to help stop shootings. But, you put that in any cop budget, it's going to get washed in the cop budget. Like, what's the effect going to be of doing this? It's not setting up, anything that's like an institution or something that's stable that we know what it's going to do. It's money that's just going to go out there.
Well, I do have to push back on you a little, Lloyd, because as the terrific philosopher Joe Biden once said, everybody knows that you don't stop police violence by defunding the police. You fund the police. Remember that speech?
I honestly, like even stuff like you said, where like the Trump, it's a show that I watch. I catch the headlines. I get the little bits of summary because, dude, I watch what happens to the people that really do get involved in the details. You start losing your mind watching this program. Like, okay, that's, you kind of go down rabbit holes and it gets a little bit much. And really all that matters is kind of like their summary statement. I look at what the average American is seeing with their 30-second soundbite. I pick up on what they're getting fed. So yeah, like, I'm not familiar with his, whatever, that quote is, but, yeah, I am familiar with like his record and position on the police and how he's helped, like look at this nation. Like we spend more money. Like, I don't know if you want to, go through the budgets and stuff and help preach to the choir thing, but the amount of money we spend on police is more than almost any other country spending on their military. I think in New York City police department alone is a bigger budget than like probably, like half the world's military budgets or something ridiculous like that. I mean, you look at these statistics and find out, it's absurd. So we have this police state that goes on. We have the largest prison population in the world, which I'm not sure, like how many times I've heard that I remember when I first found out about that was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. It was when I was in college, I think. Probably 1999, so 25 years ago or something like that. I was like, wow, this is really how it works. That they, they just put colored people into prisons and then like they keep them working as slaves. I was very shocked. And I walked out of that class. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe people don't know this. This is important. Yeah. This many years later, I'm wondering if if people don't know it, if they don't understand the implication of what that is. But, the image that Americans have of themselves versus like the actual facts. Yeah. We have a lot of ammo we can use, and the thing is though, I've seen people already create the bits and, start marketing those sorts of things. There was one really good one with Jeff Daniels, I think it was, where he railed against, like it was some movie or something where he railed against, we're number one in what? We're number one in this and number one in this. And took America to task. But, and that's something a lot of people just don't want to hear too.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It was a TV show. I think it was called Nightly News or something like that. It was a TV show where he played a news host, and that was in the pilot episode.
Okay.
Speech. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. That was excellent. Yeah, and absolutely on target.
And this is another thing too. It's like that information. Like think of all the movies and films. Like you definitely, we're lined up. So that piece of information is in our silo and we share it. And then in the national point of view, there's stuff that I've been going to lately is like the free coverage that are, you can tell the politician that they want in place because they're going to get these free ads in the news. And, you pick up on them. And one of my favorite ones was, you know what Obama shooting a 3-pointer looks like? Do you remember that video clip? Wow, you don't remember that one from the campaign? It was all over the news, and almost anybody I've talked to can remember either seeing him dancing or shooting his 3-pointer on a basketball court. And it was just
okay. I think I know.
Yeah. And it was fed to us like, oh, this is just whatever social, like this. Oh, this is a little cool thing. It's a straight up marketing thing to make him look cool, make him look relatable to stuff, and create like in his public image. Versus, you get a candidate like Marianne Williamson or who was it, Howard Dean, the rawr, where like he did that. They're just waiting for a video clip that can end most candidates. But when they put a video clip out there that like makes a candidate, you know who that guy is. You know who he works for. You know who is going to support him with all their effort. And so you're going to get exactly. Yeah, he was a great statement. He spoke so well. Yeah. Everybody listened to him. Like, I would totally like to hear that coming from the president all the time. Unfortunately, what you see happen with that presidency, people don't get that, like the Trump putting the kids in the cages. Obama built those cages.
Yeah.
Obama actually was deporting more people than Trump, if I remember correctly, too, from this. So
Biden is doing that now. Biden is deporting more, than Donald Trump. So what I keep asking people is, lesser evil where?
No, yeah, that's just it. It's a cultural thing where like what they don't like, what people get at is Trump gets the rise and gets these white nationalists that he foments. And we can, like, okay, yeah, that's what he's doing. Do you know what happens because of that is we respond with the backlash.
Yep.
The people that are running the duopoly, they like the fighting, but they don't want it getting to a point of like getting resolved. They don't want white nationalists taking over. Those guys, like, they look at them the same way as intelligent people on the left. Like, no, they're tools and we're using them, and it's not respect. Like that was often pointed out that like Trump really does not respect his supporters. Yeah. The Democrats don't respect theirs either, but like maybe slightly different key, you know what I mean? So, but anyway, as it goes, what moving forward from this and like what we need to do. And I think when we briefly talked, like I've mentioned, the public comment site is, we do need to go ahead and get to the nuts and bolts of the strategy and a plan to go ahead and what does it take to get the control of the narrative away from our corporate media. And, I have ideas on this, but this is the sort of thing where I'm like, this is where, us intelligent people that, kind of aware, we can get together, start coming up with a business plan, like it's no longer, removed the particular ideology of anything. We're talking about being able to communicate information, branding, appealing to the market. And that was something that like kind of, I wasn't impressed with that. You watched The Door, like everybody else did, the Jimmy Dore, and it created a divisive sort of situation. We just definitely don't like to see that happen. And the thing was, is like you got people that are like, they're like, oh, Jimmy Dore's all this and the negative stuff. I really never watched Jimmy Dore before, but I saw no evidence that like he's trying to hurt the movement. I believe he's genuine in what he's trying to do. I think maybe like his mindset is focused and his awareness might not have been there, that like, who his guest was and how the audience, Jimmy Dore knows his audience, knows what they like to hear him say and do, but weren't quite aware of what was going to go on. And the initial greeting of like, hey, I'm here to coach you, help you with your campaign and give you some coaching advice. That was taken by a lot of West supporters as being disrespectful. And I've been around guys that, the egos and all of that. I would have chuckled at it, but if I saw that coming in West, I would have like played it down that like, hey, Jimmy, I know you think really highly of your opinion. That's obvious. So what is it that you would go ahead, you feel like you need to tell me? And West is just, he's a big ego guy too. He didn't need to say that. He brushed right past it. I didn't think that was what set him off. It was when the advice started coming in and Jimmy was trying to convey to him that, you know, his audience, they hear things in a certain language. And in order to get across to them, you need to talk this way,
Right.
And not change the message. And that's where West came in and was like, no, I'm not changing my message. Screw white supremacy. I'm not dropping off that message and just, diluting it or watering it down to this. Like, no, you don't have to do that. But when you give a stump speech in one part of town versus another part in town, you focus on different topics and you do things a little differently. And I thought that was a bit disheartening to actually see that happen. So,
yeah. And, people have to understand that Dr. West is not a politician. He's not going to act like a politician. In fact, people will say, well, he's got no political experience, so we shouldn't let him near the White House. My position is that the person that we want the most is the person that's been avoiding that position their entire life. Cornel West never imagined himself getting into politics. He was moved by the moment, which is exactly what we need. We need someone who is not interested in being a politician.
Yeah. Oh, I agree completely. And I do think that, we need the actor. We need the Ronald Reagan or the Obama. We need somebody that can play the role.
Yeah.
Instead we have, and West, I don't think he's not acting. He's a very genuine person.
Yes.
So I'd kind of be more like, hey, can we get Keanu Reeves to like step up and do a part for us? Like he's popular. Everybody loves him. Just play Neo for us. We'll give you the script. Just like every president's getting the script from somebody else, but everybody already loves you. You get up there and you act like it's just you. Just do it. And we do that role needs to be played by somebody where it's not, that they're not the ideologue. That is where it starts getting dangerous. Then that's where, that's going to lead to an autocratic rule. That's Che Guevara and, Fidel Castro in Cuba. If you take over a system using, the military autocracy, like that structure, you're going to have a very hard time getting away from that structure once you get into power. Sure enough, that's what happened like in Cuba. Fidel just stayed in there. He couldn't replace that. Which is one of the things I've been considering too, is like, I'm like, oh, great. I got my ideas. I don't want to be, I want to help set up an infrastructure. That's why I talk about a roundtable, not, me at a podium. And like not any other one individual at a podium. We need to go ahead and work on consensus and generating policy off consensus. And that's something people have lost. We think democracy is about 51% to 49%. As a math guy, like looking at elections and seeing like, I get suspicious of like, wow, how is it that it's so often so close? Those margins in our opinions in this nation. I get really suspicious of like whether that's how true that even is.
Yeah.
But it's not acceptable. We should not be like moving forward on running this country based on the fact that like, oh, we got the 51%. Screw everybody else. We win. That sort of game needs to go away. We need. Oh no, let's talk this out. I mean, like if you had a group of people and that's how you operated, that would be so antagonistic to hang around with those people. Like, oh yeah, we're going to do it. So like, and get it. So this one guy always has a deciding vote. He's got all the power and half of us are going to feel fucking screwed all the time. Oops, sorry. I don't know if you can.
Oh no, that's fine.
Okay. Everybody's got to be 18 to watch this because they're voters, right?
Yeah. I want to ask you, I was going to ask you this later, but there was a question that came up. What are your thoughts on Peter Dow?
Oh yeah. I watched his interview, man. He is awkward in front of cameras. In fact, I don't know. I actually had emailed Jill Stein right after Peter Dow came out. And I was just like, dude, this announcement's not good. This is not how you want to do this. You need to get him in front of a camera and everybody is judging him off his resume and it's spreading like wildfire right now. People are like, oh, he was a Hillary Clinton guy and all of this other stuff from his resume. I'm like, I didn't know anything about him. And so I wouldn't even looked into his background. I was just seeing what the chatter was. And my feeling was like, get him in front of a camera, cover some of these talking points. You got to squash this before it starts going crazy. You got to control this narrative on this. So seeing him get out there, it was Savvy's was very nice to him. And he just doesn't have his presence in front of the camera. It showed to me that he looked genuine. He was working off of some script points that he had written. And there was one point, I think it was about 51, 52 minutes into the interview, where you could see he kind of dropped into talking about what his real beliefs are, the stuff that was in his head, versus this whole like scripted thing that he's having to go. You see him talking with his hands more, kind of getting excited about it. I'm like, okay, well, that's, that to me, like, at least, I feel like, like when I see somebody do that and drop out and they're not a scripted person, I have a hard time believing that he was acting all of that and acting that good, like that way beyond what skill sets imaginable. So I don't think he's like, these people putting out there that he's like a CIA operative or he's going to be sabotaging the campaign. I don't see anything to, suspect him for that sort of stuff. Yeah, and that seems to be what the concern is.
His background is concerning, to say the least.
Which makes me, and so then that's the whole suspicion of the mindset of the whole group. Then Jill Stein, Cornel West, they both want him in. So if we're going to go to that level of thinking of the conspiracy, it then becomes like, oh, well, can we trust any candidate that ever runs for president? And that goes back to like where I'm saying, like, with what I'm trying to lead us on is these ideas I have with just the Facebook groups now. I would like to see us have an institution that lasts beyond a campaign, because get the movement going, you back the candidate, and then after they're gone, it's just disarray, and like there's no organization, and everybody just like whatever, we're left to like not be organized. We need to have a standing army for this. So I'm more interested in a lasting institution more than a particular candidate. In fact, when I started this whole thing, I was working with Marianne Williamson's volunteer organization. I like what her platform, everything like there. So I got really involved in that. I saw that they're actually running a very strict top-down organization. And then when I came over, and somebody in that group said I would get better traction with Cornel West supporters with what I was talking about, and sure enough, I actually did. And it was really kind of in a situation too where Cornel West had nothing going on with his volunteer campaign. So I could step in and be like, hey, we're not doing anything. Let's, there's nothing official going on, so we can unofficially start, aligning and getting this organized for him. But if the influence of politics is so much so that we can't trust anything, Peter Dow, Cornel West, and honestly, after Bernie, Bernie was brutal. That betrayal, like, I think that's actually made really much of this worse. It's like after Bernie, like, oh yeah, we're really going to trust Peter Dow is now your campaign manager. Oh, everybody's suspicious. And think about how genius that is by the people that are in charge. In fact, I don't know. Like, to me, it seems like Machiavelli must have written like some idea that, like, what, if you can get somebody, a populist leader, elevated, and then you don't kill them, you don't let them be a martyr, you have to break them in front of the people. You have to ruin their reputation. You have to destroy them that way. And if you do that, then you're wiping out their following. That's the more effective way. If you kill them and make them a martyr, you're actually going to galvanize that following, and that'll be more dangerous for you. So I don't know. Like, yeah. So with Bernie is kind of like the big one. I'm like, what went on there? How did that happen? I don't know. In fact, like, I don't know if anybody recognizes those mittens. I got the Bernie mittens shirt on. I was like a fan of him, like from like that. I'm like, oh yeah, but that was very disheartening. So that's with Peter Dow. Like, I mean, we only have so much information to go off of, and I think a lot of people like to. I think it's tough for people to suspend belief and suspend forming an opinion and making a judgment, and actually just like holding back, kind of waiting to get a more clear picture. I don't have any reasons to make a judgment of, that he's suspect or whatever. That there's any issue there. It seems to be basically what they've said, straightforward, face value. So.
Yes, but given, I think the concern is given his back. I mean, we all know what they did to Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to take him down. I guess the question is Cornel West making the best decisions for his campaign?
Yeah, like once again, that's where the things that happen lately, I'm way more focused on. Let's organize ourselves together, and I'm all for continuing sports campaign. But those questions, I definitely think they need to be addressed. I don't, and for the people that are watching the show, I don't want to put out bad press for Wes, but I think that there's and there goes the Dore interview when he said that Jimmy Dore says your advisors should do this, and he made that statement back. He's like, I don't got advisors, I'm free thinking mountains. Man, Jimmy Dore's not even trying to hurt you with these questions, and you're kind of you're really miffing the hits on those. And so I do see West making missteps. I do think that he needs to surround himself and take the offer of the advice and the strategy. These people want to help you win.
Yes.
So if he could bring more on board and see a more complete campaign, because I believe what he'll be able to rally himself. It's with just who he is and his track record and history, I don't think that's enough to win an election. He's popular, but I don't think there's anybody that's really that popular in our culture that they can do it alone off of just their rep. Trump even had to work his brand all the way up to that.
Yeah, well, we've seen where that works for all of us.
but we do need our Trump. And we need to just go ahead and make our Trump a paid actor. I'm all for Keanu Reeves. No, but you know what I'm saying? If we could get a face on it, that people just, I love that. That's how simple they are. This really would win us a lot by just going ahead and be like, hey, and you're really good at delivering lines. Just do the speeches we've got. Everybody believes it. And, and you see what reality matters. I mean, Donald Trump, I think how many, there was a lie a day sort of record. It wasn't like he lied once and they caught him on, he went the other way. He's like, I'm lying so much, it don't even matter. I'm just, whatever I say, who cares? They cheer, he really made fun, I'm like, wow. There was the bit of Joe Rogan back in the 2000s, can we go dumber? Do you know the Joe Rogan bit on that? When they're talking about when the guys in the Bush council is like, do you think we can go dumber? And I'm like, yeah, I feel like that's they're like, it actually works if we go dumber. It works if we really bring it down to the most banal nonsense. And that's going to get us, all these people rallied and riled up and going. So, that's what, that's a huge chunk of voters. Even if you're only looking at 20%, that's still 20% of voters that would operate this way. And they're human beings. They're people that we should care about, So what is it that they care about? How can we get a message across to them so that they vote for somebody that helps them?
Right.
That's the thing. They're voting for a guy, they're supporting a guy that's telling them, pumping them up for what they want to hear. But, it didn't help any of those people out, and they're kind of convinced he did, because to them, it was just he pissed off liberals. If anything they have in common, it's not so much they love Trump. They love seeing the neoliberals get pissed off. The people that you're so smart and you're running things and you're fucking it all up and you think you're so good at it. I get the frustration with that,
But there are people that think that Joe Biden is helping them.
Oh yeah. I don't get it. But if you go ahead and look at what the message they're getting pumped out, it's the same sort of people that were believing that it's the neoliberal crowd. It's the people that actually still believe that Obama, I've talked to people Obama's a good president. He did these good things, and they're able to go ahead and make a rational argument. Like I was saying, they've got it, he passed the nonpartisan or bipartisan whatever thing, and people will look at that and, well, yeah, look, that's something that's good. And they won't look at the nuts and bolts and realize no, it really isn't. You just like the packaging, just like the other side does. And they're not going to go at that all this money that goes to Ukraine versus how do we deal with the response to Hawaii. That's what the mainstream media really helps Biden out with that. with that image. And so is it really necessary? Are we going to have to go and crack this image of Biden in order to win? Like, I mean, we're going to have to go ahead and somehow convince all these voters that what Biden really is. Are they able to wake up, or is there a positive message that we can go beyond that and say, like, oh no, we don't not talk about Biden. Like, we have the better offer, like we don't have to compare ourselves to that. We're stepping up here. This is the better offer. Can we market something that just gets more traction instead of, as they say, going negative on the other candidate?
Yeah. Well, it's hard for me not to go negative on Joe Biden. I'm very adverse to him. Have been his entire career, and was, I swallowed my pride and put my morals aside for Hillary Clinton, because I was convinced that, Donald Trump was going to, I bought into that. To be quite honest with you, I actually thought when Donald Trump won, I actually had a bit of hope, because I'm like, oh, this might wake the Democratic Party up, and maybe they'll come back and they'll say, well, we really have to earn voters' votes this time. No, they doubled down and went with Joe Biden, and I couldn't swallow that.
Actually, like, my expression when Trump won was that, like, oh, I am so glad Hillary lost. That's what I was like. I'm like, yeah, I get it. And like my friends are like, how, like, you're not, you're a white dude, like, you don't care what he's really about, what he's really going after. I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm insensitive about that. But yeah, I don't think you quite get what it would mean, like, what this means that she lost. I'm like, but then I realized too, it's like, oh my gosh, he's playing a role in a circus. God damn it. Yeah. So, like, the people that are pulling the strings are like, they think he didn't, win on his own. He was allowed to win. He's part of the show. Yeah. And, he did some interesting things in his first days in office, like, completely taking apart the pandemic response crew. What a premonition this guy had. He doesn't do anything to, he plays golf, and he does things to, like, steal stuff, like, you can get his character. He's not really concerned with, like, the political machine, how to tweak the country or do any of that shit. No, he's an megalomaniac kind of guy. He's out playing golf and doing stuff. Why would you disassemble the pandemic response team? Like, that's a little of a niche maneuver to do when you first get in. Anyway, getting off track with Biden, completely agree. Like, going back to his track record of, like, even back to the 90s, everything the guy's ever said is fear mongering in my book. I mean, he was fear mongering about black youth in the ghetto back then. Oh, we didn't call them black. They were just violent kids in poor neighborhoods. We were not racist. Yeah. So, went from that being the fear to now we've got school shootings, like, got to be scared of, like, these crazy, Trump supporting white, racist school shooters that are going crazy on our country. And, it's just fear mongering. Like, I mean, I do take that very seriously. Like, I got a daughter that's in school, so I'm like, don't want anybody to get my words twisted on that's not something that's real. But when you've got somebody that's pumping it up and not really doing like, going all the way, like, these half measures that he took with this bill that he passed are, people get it. They're half measures. They're weak, they're just enough. And that's the whole neoliberal gameplay. Yeah. It's like, how little do we have to do to keep you people from revolting completely? And that's what neoliberalism is in a nutshell for me. Like, it's just this other side of, the duopoly with fascism. So you got the group that we're scared of over here, and then, like, oh, we're the good guys that, barely keeping you from, failing.
And so Joe Biden is a fascist, and the very sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going back to, like, I'm seeing that people now are using Mussolini's original definitions. From what I've seen, Mussolini defined fascism as corporatism. It's just like this relationship. And, like, if, he was alive now, I think Mussolini would look at the world and be like, this is a fascist dream come true. Like, wow, these people don't even know it's fascism. Like, wow, how do you, like, we labeled it. Like, we were saying it's a really great way to run things this way. And you guys are able to do it with this duopoly system and having people believe, like, believe that they're still free, believe that they're, like, you've kept up this illusion of choice. which is amazing to have. And it's something I was talking about in the 90s with my professors when I was in school, was that the Soviet Union, why big reasons it fell is they were failing to deliver the people the illusion of choice. And it was quite clear that that was the language that we were talking about. It's they don't have to have real choices. They just have to have the illusion of choice.
Yeah, and that's absolutely what we have. Is it's all an illusion, and it doesn't really matter who wins. If it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, their end result is going to be the same. The only difference is going to be the way the media portrays it and the way that we feel it. It's an emotional play is what it is. Mackenzie's asking, and I was going to get into this with you a little bit later. Why Cornel West? I know my reasons. But,
like I said, to me, it's no longer, it's where people are with the platform issues. I think if we get people together on the left, we kind of come up with, what is the basic platform, and you can put all these things together that you want to have. It's kind of irrelevant. It's we need to get somebody elected. So looking at what you can you get Marianne Williamson? Like I said, I was part of her campaign to begin with. Elected. I don't think you're going to get past the DNC.
Absolutely.
I saw, and I was asking that question right in the door. I'm like, so what's our strategy for being able to win the primary? And not able to get that. I'm like, all right, so how can I help keep the volunteers organized so that they stay together after that? And they're like, well, that's something we're dealing with down the road. I'm like, well, all right, I don't feel like there's much I can do to help your campaign out. And if you go on, she's got really if you want to see platform stuff, Marianne Williamson's, and go to her website and look at, she's a huge list, probably more information than any of the other candidates, that give you a couple hours worth of reading to get through everything she's put out. And it goes, is that helping her campaign? No, these are the sorts of things that seem like, if you ask me,
right,
we could sit down to common sense, right? So that's just it. I feel like Cornel West is he's at the he's at the point where it's common sense stuff. You don't have to trump this. And one of the big issues I've got that I'm not seeing anybody do is, are we talking about nationalizing our central bank? Are we really talking about system change? And you're what? If there might be a couple of listeners out there whoa, somebody actually said that on a program. That's not something we talk about. We don't even imagine how monetary systems can work, or what the impact is of what our system is. And people, their comprehension of macroeconomics is it's not void. It's wrong. They think that the national debt is something we pay off. Well, go ahead and look at this. The national debt, somebody go ahead and Google the numbers. You're going to see what the national debt is it just over 30 trillion. I'm sorry. Somewhere over 30 trillion. Then look up the amount of M2 currency we have. And you will see that we're about, I don't know, it's somewhere in between $6 to $8 trillion less M2 currency than our national debt. In other words, what I'm trying to say is there is not enough money among all of us if we all drained all our checking accounts, all our saving accounts, cashed out bonds, put everything, is liquidated every asset we have into money, we wouldn't have enough money to pay off the national debt. So do you think that the national debt is actually something that we pay off? No, it's a mechanism in a fiat credit currency system.
Yep.
And what really would make sense is really, important, I think, is if we nationalized our central bank, if we took the Fed back, and if our government would go ahead and provide, for example, mortgages to everybody in America and say hey, we guarantee you a mortgage, just make your payment to us, no interest on the loan, pay it back at any time. We could actually, that's a closed loop money system. The money would actually come back around. It wouldn't flood the market with anything like that, but it would allow everybody to own property, a house. There's 28 houses for every homeless person in this country. So this isn't having this sort of impact on the supply demand of an economy. No, this is just going to get people in houses doing this. And it would back our dollar with kind of, the value of the real estate in this country. But if we did this, if we took over, the government took over and nationalized the central bank, we don't have to have taxes anymore. We could drop that discussion. Corporate income tax would go away. Personal income tax go away. We could completely repeal the 16th Amendment. And that's exactly in 1913 when they passed. That was the exact same time that they put the Federal Reserve in place and set the bankers up with a system that is just an unending cash cow. It is like getting to be the banker in Monopoly and paying yourself every time somebody passes go. really what they've got set up. And people could just get that scam down, that like it's genius. Like, in fact, there's like a whole story of Jekyll Island. You can look up the history books on this. It's a genius system that they came up with. It profits themselves and, helps get the money at the top. And then it came into full fruition in the 70s when we got completely off the gold standard with Nixon. And if you look at the change in the way our economy behaved right after that, like, go ahead and look at just about any graph of like, of anything that's happened in this country. You go back to about 1971, and you'll see like this huge boom and change of like, everything starts becoming the world we have today. Very different. In fact, I even think it actually helped women's rights back then, because it wasn't until the 70s that women could have a checking account. And I don't think that was allowed to happen because it was for women. I think it was for bankers. I think they just thought, oh my gosh, we have this huge untapped market potential right here. Why do we want to keep women out of this? So, that's once again the crossover between our, social issues and our economic ones too.
Yeah, well, everything is socioeconomic. And yeah, I agree with nationalizing the central bank. I mean, again, what we have is a government that is more corrupt than the mafia.
Definitely. And everybody knows it. Like, it's reported. This is the genius, I think, too, of how they keep it in place. We get our news broadcast telling us 70% of Americans believe this. 80% of the Americans would like to see the government do this. Over half Americans feel like this. And our government is doing exactly not that. And it's just like, like, we hear you. We don't care.
Yeah.
We hear you. We don't care. They repeat it every day. We hear you. We don't care.
Yeah. Look at Medicare for all. Majority of Democrats and Republicans support that. Joe Biden, I'd veto it.
Yeah, it's straight up there. Like, well, our polls say everybody wants health care. And like, they keep putting a message out there like, oh, how are you going to pay for it? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, that question still works on people. Like, like how are you going to pay for it? That's, if you've ever been in charge of the budget of the House, that's exactly the sort of thing that like comes up when you want to control the purse strings. Just, oh, well, how are we going to pay for that? I'm going to go out and buy us this, So the government can pay for anything it wants to. A lot of people look up modern money theory, and I agree with most of the tenets on that, except for they don't really advocate nationalizing the central bank. They look at allowing this BS to continue with what the bankers are doing and a taxation system staying in place. And, I couldn't be more libertarian with my points of view on like that. We do not need taxes. It is a completely ridiculous infringement on people. And, the founding fathers, even like, there should not be a head tax. There should not be an income tax on people. You should not just be charging people to exist in this country and work and exist. And if you're rich, you don't have to. And everybody knows that too. If you have enough money, the big corporations, they know how to work the rules and get away with it. And it's allowed. But, if you're like me and you, and I come out and say like, I don't pay taxes. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, you're a criminal then. Or the stuff with Cornel West, like, oh, you owe some back taxes. Like, oh, he must be a bad guy. Well, really? Because look at all these guys that don't pay taxes. And the corporations, Google's not paying any taxes. I mean, it shows up. I don't know how people can be ignorant to it, because it does get broadcast out there that our corporations are not paying taxes. They're operating with overseas accounts, rich people, Panama Papers. I don't know how much in tune you have to be, but they make movies about it. I fear like got to be a few chunks of people, big chunk of people out there that already know this stuff.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting about Cornel West and the taxes and which I believe was resolved. And frankly, my comeback to that is that's the worst that you can say about the man.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Joe Biden.
Yeah. I'm like, they're and that's kind of gets down to what I'm saying with like how long we can sit around and rationalize and have this level of discussion when you kind of get down to the point of a huge chunk of people are not much better than Trump supporters in terms of what they'll, their mind's already made up. They already know what the good guy is, what the bad guy is. They're not going to switch these things. And if you ever get it to change, it will be a gradual change. And you really, you have to do things gradually, which is kind of, the Animal Farm sort of thing. Like that's what the bad guys have been doing for some time. Is if you look at what we call somebody on the left and somebody on the right now, and we know how bad Reagan was. Like, but if you go back and look at stuff now, you can realize that, like, Joe Biden's in many ways to the right of Reagan. Like it's,
oh yeah.
I'm like, dude, Reagan had a bigger heart than Biden does.
Yeah.
Reagan was talking about like, the situation with immigrants, taking care of people. Like if he could see what was going on with where the right's gone to today in terms of immigration policy, Reagan would be kind of like, oh, I can't believe you guys, you're acting like fascists. But Reagan was, he was just a spokesperson for the people. He was an actor. Like I think he believed a few of the things, but pretty much he was just in favor. He liked the script he was being fed. I think that's it. And that's what you get from the guy at the top. Biden, though, like that's one of the things I politically don't get is it's really insulting. Honestly, I'm like, I could get Obama. People liked hearing him speak, and he represented the first Black president. I could get why people would like that, but Biden he lacks all of that. You know what I mean? Like we can't even get a good statesman from the Democrats anymore. We can't even get somebody that's well spoken anymore to stand up. I mean, so like there's that certain insult that's actually added to it. Kind of like, like how dumb can we get? Like, how bad can we really make it for you? And taunt, just like taunt you with the fact that like, oh yeah, you're powerless. You can't do anything. And we, you're just going to eat what we feed you.
Well, what is it? Isn't there, I don't remember the statistic, but I'm pretty sure it was over 50%. The majority of Democrats do not want Joe Biden to be the nominee.
Oh yeah.
Who are they going to make the nominee? Joe Biden. That is them saying we don't care.
There you go. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's yeah, and like if the more they can go ahead, if they repeat the message and it sinks in at that psychological level on people, it really does. I mean, it affects them. Like, yeah, they're hopeless. They're like, oh yeah, completely disillusioned, and like doing the stuff like crushing Bernie, like, oh yeah. All these guys like beating the opposition up, beating you into submission this way. I think they've really worked out. I don't think it's just like accidental. I mean, they've got think tanks. They put this much money into it. I think it's, social engineering and a huge social psychology thing. I mean, like, look at how much money they figure out to just make a commercial to sell you shoes. Yeah. And you don't think that they're working harder on that to script this show? Yeah.
Well, I think that there's two types of Biden voters. Well, maybe three. There may be a very small minority people who actually love Biden. I think the rest of the faction is divided between those who have bought into the media's propaganda that Joe Biden is actually doing good things. And then there are those who don't like Joe Biden, but will vote for him simply to keep Donald Trump out of the White House.
Yeah. I think a huge chunk, actually, I think the larger chunk are that's that second group that they just, that it's the fear of Trump that has them motivated. And I think anybody, the rest of the one that think that Joe Biden's doing a good job, it's just because they like to, the mentality that's like, it's easier if I say I like it, and they listen to the news, giving them reasons, justifications. So they're like, yeah, I like Joe Biden. And yeah, they need to have that. It's a psychological effect that they need to have. So the news feeds them like these talking points of like, he's did this and this and this. And they pump them up. They're like, okay, that's enough for me. I feel good with this, because they don't want to be like, well, I'm voting for the lesser of two evils. I really don't like him. So they have to convince themselves of stuff. And, it's just human psychology that we do these things. So
I like the idea of building a movement. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But on that topic, on that point, how do we build a movement that can overcome this mentality? Because I understand the argument, and I can almost agree on certain terms that Joe Biden is better in some respects than Donald Trump. But it's the same thing. It's the same system. So it doesn't really matter to me which one is in power. But that fear that people have that forces them into voting for the lesser of two evils, convinced that they're starving off fascism. How do we overcome that? I mean, that's been manufactured by design.
Yeah, that's right. And so I'm not joking about, like, we definitely need to get us, the people that are understanding this, that don't need the messages repeat to us, that we can actually come together and strategize. And that's, like I said, started some Facebook groups, but I've whatever I have to do to connect with everybody. I'm hunting us down. We need to come together and realize it is a marketing and information situation. So the way that you can do that is we do have quite a few people on the left that work in information, work in the entertainment, work in the messaging. We need to go ahead and be able to craft the messages out there that change the views of people and start seeing things the way we want them to see them for their own benefit. We are selling. It really does not matter at the end of the day if we raise their consciousness, if we actually get them more aware. We're not trying to make them smarter. We really just want to lead them to where they need to go, and understand that, like, we cannot treat them like we're treating ourselves. Like it's a respectful dialogue. Like, I'm going to rationalize this with you. I want you to agree with me on this. No, we need to just treat them like how they like to be treated, want to be treated. Like, provide them with the information, sell them the image. So, when you talk about, how to do it, make a movie, man. Like, like, create a narrative, create a script, a storyline, that whole sort of thing. That's I refer to a common as like our shared narratives. So we do need to have like kind of stories like, I associate with this narrative, I get what's going on, and I associate with this side. I have an identity now with this group. So scripting identities. And that's one of the things I've pointed out to people on the left. Marianne Williamson's campaign was like, I don't appeal to male voters. Why don't I appeal to male voters? And I was like, because look at your list of stuff. Where does it say anything in there that you're trying to appeal to male voters? You kind of have to be intentional about this. You're not saying anything that gives them identity. Trump came along and said, put on a red hat. Here you go. You got an identity, right. And they jumped on it. The left really doesn't provide identity to, like, these guys that are driving pickup trucks. They intellectual dudes like me and you. Yeah. We what I mean? We know who we are on the left, right? We're the empathetic and intellectual people, guys that are on the left. That's where we fit in. But if you're driving a pickup truck, wearing plaid or whatever, country boy sort of stuff, like that's, at best you're going to get, who's the guy that just came with this? Oliver.
Oh, I know.
Richmond, north of Richmond.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, he nailed it, dude. So whatever they did with him, like, that is how we did that, dude. We need him working for us. He said it, like, we help him change a couple lines in his song. Yeah. All right. Quit jumping his shit for a couple of lines in his song, because that's not really like what that audience is hearing. They're like pissed at this group, not over, like, of course they're still blaming welfare recipients. Can we educate them a little bit though? But we've got the anger unleashed at the right people and that sort of thing. He made a 5-minute video. So you want to know how to get to him? Sean, right there. That's how you get to him. That is what it was like 3-4 minute music video, went viral, got the message out. You create that sort of association with a bigger brand, a marketing plan, like, with the platform, with the group, and back it up with information so that, people can go ahead and be like, oh, like, follow up on that. And they can, they get the information out of it. Like, so it's not just an empty marketing plan, but actually leads to, the education that, we already can put the education together, your whole, I mean, how many times have you probably repeated like the 30-minute spiel that you did before this show? Like, I mean, just in parts, like all of those talking points, all of that, like over years, right?
Yeah.
It was just a distilled version of a lot of the other stuff out. So, that's what I'm seeing is like, so that there's something, how do we get out and appeal? It's those creative sort of things. It's not rational arguments. It's not coming up with like the talking point and the message that really works. It's like this, it's PR and marketing. and it's going to come from places that are real and genuine like that. A lot of people said like he astroturfed his stuff. I'm like, really? Because personally, like when I saw that song, I hadn't posted anything on my page for a long ass time. I'm like, boom, I linked and shared that. So I'm like, I think a lot of other people did kind of basically what I did. I don't think this was like where you were pushing it out through a bunch of bots to get it out there. And even if you did, it would have gone viral anyway, if you ask me. That's, his huge popularity out of nowhere. And, generally from what I've seen, I like that guy. He seems like he's genuine. And that's the sort of people that we want to help get on board on the left, because something tells me based on a couple of the lyrics in the song that he has been getting a lot of his information from the right, and he has been getting fed a lot of the propaganda, but, he saw through a lot of it.
Well, I mean, I agree with you, but let's not forget what Bill Clinton did to welfare as well. So this message, this blaming people, because that's the issue that I had with the song. It was that there's a few lines that I would change because I think that they're just totally off the mark. And
the welfare lines, right?
Yeah, exactly. And but the interesting thing is, I liked that song when I heard it. I forgave that line for being there about the welfare because the song is targeting the right people. But I knew instantly that people were going to hate him because they were going to associate him with Trumpers, which is exactly what they did. And it was so refreshing when he came out and said, I ain't no Republican. It was about those people on that stage.
Yeah. No, and I was that was my prediction too. I'm like, I don't think he's a shill. Like, I really think this guy, like, I was in Southern Oregon for a long time. No guys that make music there that's like that. And I really think he just nailed it with his lyrics and his music, and it came together right. And there is like, we could do a remix of that song and change, like, I think it's just 2 lines in that song, basically. You swap that up with something about the military industrial complex, bam, dude. Now we're talking #1 on the charts on the left side too. And when I say left too, I mean, like, when we go back to Clinton, Clinton's on the right. Like, when I say left, I'm like, everything is on the right at this point in time, in my book, that, like when we're talking about that spectrum of stuff too. So, but yeah.
The imaginary center.
Yeah. It's arbitrary. It's actually made more of the social division, which is some of the stuff too, is like, it's really caught me that they've come up with being able to use, like, that's always, and where Cornel West was just like, what I find frustrating is that he's not seeing it as being used the other way. Like, he's like, the racism and capitalism and the suppression of people and the division of people tied together. So we use race to divide. So now they're using it like kind of the other way of, like, hey, if we can get you guys all talking about trans and stuff and talking about, identity politics with this stuff, you're going to divide the populace for us. We don't have to do shit. We don't have to do anything. And then he goes to the Marianne Williamson campaign where she was talking about getting male voters. And then I was part of the group that's like looking at like a statement of Men for Marianne and the things that they were coming out with. And the second line in their statement about Men for Marianne is, we as Men for Marianne include trans men, ... And it just goes on for the rest of the sentence. But I realized, like, I read this far, I'm like, are you really trying to pitch this to the pickup guys? Like, and the second sentence that you put in there is that we are inclusive with trans men. You couldn't leave that to the fine print at the bottom. You really want to advertise that in this message. And I'm not being disingenuous on this at all. I'm like, that they're going to feel alienated by the fact that that's what you're leading with.
Right.
Not what's important to them. No, that's not what's important to them. You're completely missing the point. You're not seeing them by saying this. Why? And there's this lack of savvy. I'm like, is this malice or ignorance? You know what I mean? And at a certain point, it kind of starts becoming indistinguishable. And that's where I get a little confused. I know I'm kind of a sharp guy, but somebody upstairs that's like writing these messages. Are you intentionally trying to, like, shoot yourself in the foot with this stuff? Is there a reason that you really need to be doing it this way? So, we do need to be, the people that I want to bring together, we do need to be in tune with, how to go ahead and talk to a bunch of people and deliver the message to everybody and get them to hear it, and not think that everybody hears things the same way when we say it. because I'll tell you, I piss a lot of people off with just being me. You know, I love people, you know, I respect them, care about them, but I definitely know that just my energy, I come across as, you know, my confidence comes across as arrogance. And, you know, no matter how polite and understanding I am towards somebody, like it, you know, dude, they don't hear what I'm saying. They hear like this thing that comes across to them. And I'm like, I've learned to live with that. But, you know, we as a group need to go ahead and realize that we can't keep doing that. Otherwise nobody's going to listen to us. They you know, we're going to get, you know, slapped with an ism on us pretty soon. Like, you know, you know, the left is going to start getting labeled as communists again. They're actually calling us, like, I think, you know, just use socialists. And we're like, yeah, we are socialists. Like, you're not listening, dude. That's a negative. Quit going with that. You know, like that's so that they don't have to hear the rest of what you have to say. So if we can drop the isms from our language of the discussion of stuff and kind of get down to it, because stuff like pulling people in from the right with a discussion of like, you know what, we need to take back the Fed, which is, you know, not true because we never had the Fed. It was created as a private bank, but like they like the slogan, I think, you know, take back the Fed and, you know, get control of our money supply, and then we can actually, you know, issue the money and we'll get rid of taxes. And we say this sort of stuff. I'm talking communism here. Like that's like straight up communist, heart of communist shit. And you can go back to a guy named Harry Dexter White in this country who made huge accomplishments as a, you know, Secretary of the Treasury. It led to a couple of programs that led us out of the Depression and helped the global economy after World War II. He got accused of being a Soviet spy and ran through the mud because he was a proponent of and published a work in 1940, I think, for nationalizing the central bank, nationalizing the Fed. And they destroyed him for it. And that was kind of like, you know, that really kicked off the Red Scare. That was why we, they didn't want communism. We do not want to talk about this. Get it out of the realm of discussion, remove it completely. And it's been forgotten since then. Like people, you know, they managed to make us ignorant enough. Nobody knows where money comes from. Like my litmus test for a lot of people is like, how does money get put into circulation? Do you know that? Like you've been to school all these years, people with business degrees, you know, the graduate, I'm like, do you know how money, you know, our money supply is constantly increasing. You know that that's happening. Where does new money get put into our system at? How does that happen? And people are like, the Treasury prints it? I'm like, okay. And so where does it go once the Treasury prints it? How does it like goes to the bank? I don't know. Like, well, who gets it first? And like people are like, what the heck? They're like, the question's missing them. And the answer is simple. It's like when the bank makes a loan and loans you money for a mortgage, for example, it's like a secure loan like that. They do not loan you money they have. They print brand new money, they loan it to you, and then they're collecting it back with interest. It's a genius scam, dude. If I was on the other side of it, I don't know how good of a moral conscience I would be able to have to want to fix the problem we've got in this country. You know, honestly, like, and that's true. If I was on the other side of the situation, I would just be kind of like, well, we need to just act as better actors. You know, that's the neoliberal point of view. It's like, we need to just go ahead and act as better. We don't want to give this power up. You know, and like it's really tough, but that would be the rational position that you could probably get to on the other side. So getting to a point of saying you want to give up power is tough.
How we've only got 7 minutes or so left. Yeah, 5 minutes or so. So I really want to get to where people can go to join your group and to participate in this roundtable. And because what we need is a movement and a platform that really can make this happen.
So the easiest one is like, I've got public comments on Facebook set up. So if you look for public comments, I've made it kind of easy to remember that. So public comments. Town hall is another one you can find. The town hall is a private group though, so that we can go ahead and moderate it better. But anybody it can join public comments right now. And I don't think that I'm going to be getting like thousands of people joining right off the bat here. So if you're interested, that's where you can jump to right now to get into the discussion. I would like to see as many people as can at least join in on that level and help with the organization. I would like to. That's the thing. I have a huge problem with like, if I have control of stuff and in charge of things, like that system will not work. I definitely want a non-autocratic system. It needs to be run by, consensus. committees, and democracy. So that's I want to see people that can step up, like, hey, I appreciate what's going on. I've got the idea. I've got the vision, and like the rules we need to have are just respect. It really boils down to, like, if you know what respect is, it's kind of the only rule we need. Like, if we could just engage in civil discourse, bam, let's keep it simple. So.
Do you think that this group is possible on Facebook, or do you think it would be better on a different platform?
Oh, it would definitely be better to jump into a better platform. I'm dealing with this using the existing tools off the shelf. Right. So when you go out and you want to build a prototype, you kind of grab all the cheapest parts you can and the ones that are available. So I'm doing this, and like the way it's set up is using 3 groups on Facebook to do this. And so this is not even getting into like what we do with spreading messages through Instagram or Twitter. Like, if we can get the model for this kind of working on Facebook, maybe we can get going. But like, I do have somebody that's already working on trying to, build a website. So, and what we need is to be able to have access to each other's information. So that's the whole point of the public comments. If you go on there, we're going to try and keep it moderated. So as long as it's respectful, like if you got a point of view or something to say and, get your word out to the public discussion, you think you have something important to say, you can go there and say it. You can hear what other people are saying. You can organize this way. It'll be a bit chaotic at first, but, that's the kind of the, working it out is part of what would happen with that chaos. And that's something I mentioned in a post that I made to begin with, is calling it a public comment is a pointing reference to tragedy of the commons. Are you familiar with the tragedy of the commons? Of the other viewers aren't. It's like, if you have an open resource and the public can use it, the public just uses it to their own benefit and destroys it. And that would go with a platform that gives somebody a voice. So if we're trying to have a platform that lets anybody come and talk, like, what you're going to have is a bunch of noise and chatter and spamming and trolling, and it's not going to work for us. So there is some structure set up for kind of how this can be moderated to prevent it from turning into a tragedy, and that we would actually be able to preserve a place where we can have a public dialogue. And if people can respect that and understand the value of that, I think that's something culturally we can keep and maintain. And that's kind of where I see a big change. For a long time, I was focused on we needed infrastructure, that we really needed to have formulas to put people together. I think it's really kind of, we need to develop the culture of respect, and be able to actually go ahead and get back to civil discourse again, instead of this adversarial culture we've learned from TV of watching. You got the pundit, and then you got the host, the guy that comes on. It's adversarial, and they just attack each other. And the idea isn't to resolve and come to consensus. It's just to provide entertainment value and prove you're right. One-upmanship sort of stuff.
Yeah. No, I've got some ideas that I want to run by you. I'll do that in a few days. I think this is a fascinating project that you're trying to work on, and I have some ideas that I want to share with you. So I'll definitely be doing that. I want people to please go to these and join these groups. So we've got public and people can just search for.
Just if they just public comments. So like, keep it real simple. All the other information is there. So if they get on the public comments, I haven't even started that. Like, I think I'm the only member. I think there's actually one other guy that was a tech guy that was helping me. So there's only like 2 members when I've sat down and done this with you. So if you get on right now, and I keep my time free. So if, people want to just talk with me about stuff, like, I'm just a dude, I'll take phone calls. I'll chat with you. As long as I still have time, I'm going to do that. And I really I'm not really kind of worried about getting inundated. I really think that, Sean, that there's really very few of us that are capable of operating on this level and that are doing it. It's up to us to kind of take the leadership position, and lead the charge on this and organize people. And that's the message that Cornel West has been putting out there is, is that we need grassroots movements, and we need organization at the bottom to beat the money at the top. One of his quotes. So,
well, I want to thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you'll come back. And again, people, please, public comments. And again, if you've got ideas, we have to move beyond this 2-party system, and we have to stop being afraid, and we have to stop being afraid of each other. We have to come together. We should not be. What drives me crazy is the way that Trump voters are treated, right? we need to be working with them and bring them over to our side on the issues that we find agreement with, and then build from there.
Uh-oh.
Will you agree?
I'm losing your feed a bit. I don't know if it's my internet or yours.
It might be the platform.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I want to thank you for joining us.
No, and I'd be glad to come back sometime to talk more, Sean. So
that'll be great. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week, next Tuesday at 2:00. This has been Coup Save America. You're listening to citizens.am.